Spoiler warning. Warning. Spoilers for Deltarune chapters 3 and 4, and by extension chapters 1 and 2 ahead. Do not watch this video unless you have played Deltarune up to chapter 4 or you don't care about spoilers. Without further ado, let's start. Intro. June of this year, as of a writing of this script, the third and fourth chapters of Deltarune were released. Recently I've bought and completed these chapters. Now that the game is halfway done, all that's left are the final 3 chapters. In this video expose, I will highlight what I believe will happen in Deltarune chapter 5, based on hints from the previous 4 chapters. Recap of chapters 3 and 4. Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 have been way bigger than any of us anticipated. Chapter 3 picks up right where chapter 2 left off, with Chris having created a dark world inside their living room. Thus they, Susie, and Rousey end up having to play games for Tedda, the darker version of their TV, who has severe separation anxiety stemming from Toriel and Asgore's divorce. After a boss battle with Tedda, where the Fun Gang managed to drive up ratings high enough, similar to Mettaton EX's boss battle Undertale, he is ready to hand Toriel over to them, but he is attacked from behind, taking 5,500 to 6,000 damage. The value is randomized and both of his arms are severed. The Roaring Knight has made themselves known and banned the Fun Gang. While the Fun Gang puts up a fight, they are no match for the Knight, but Undyne swoops in, only to get carried away for her troubles. Chris and Susie chase the Knight across hometown, but they manage to get into the bunker and shut the door. However, if you do good enough in Tedda's minigames, Chris can play the unaltered version of a game Tedda has them and their friends play. If they beat Aram, that game's final boss, they gain the Shadow Mantle, which greatly reduces the damage from the Roaring Knight's attacks, making it easier to do enough damage to chip the Knight's Sword, get the Black Shard, a powerful weapon that either Chris or Noelle can equip, which does massive damage against Titans and Titan-like monsters, like 10 times normal damage. It legit trivializes the finale of chapter 4. I have to say, I legit bet that the Knight wouldn't appear until chapter 5, so I was just as surprised as everyone when the Knight showed up at the end of chapter 3. And I will say that the Roaring Knight is the hardest battle in the game, as it took me 2 days to beat. Plus, I legit wasn't expecting Toby Fox to hide a secret boss within the scripted encounter. Anyways, chapter 4. Chapter 4 starts with Toriel taking Chris and Susie to church, where the 2 kids ask around for hints on the shelter. This leads them to the Holiday Manor, where it reveals that Chris, without the soul, is working with Mayor Care Holiday, the Holiday matriarch, on something. And Asgore seems to be helping her with that, and has his own agenda, as the secret cutscene shows. If he did the Snowgrave route in chapter 2, then it is revealed that Berdly is alive, thankfully, albeit comatose, so he's nowhere near as annoying. Unfortunately, also the Soul takes over Chris and forces him to put the sword ring back on Noelle, clearly planned on snowgraving someone in the future. Also, Chris attempts to destroy the Soul, only being stopped by Asgore. Once the trip to the Holiday Manor wraps up, the Fun Gang discovers a dark world within the church. No, 2 dark worlds. A third one is created by Susie in order to get info on the password to enter the chapel. Inside that dark world, they meet an old man who is clearly the darker version of a deceased Gerson who wrote Lore of the Hammer based off an ancient prophecy. While both Lore of the Hammer and the prophecy speak of events that have happened, each say what will happen next and something that has to do with Asgore and his flower shop, Flower King. The prophecy speaks, the Flower Man, trapped in the asylum. And the 5th chapter of Lord of the Hammer is the Field of Pink and Gold, with a synopsis being the vast garden charred in an inferno of jealousy. We will put a pin in that for later. Eventually, the Fun Gang corners the Roaring Knight by the Dark Fountain, intend to run past the Knight, but the Knight creates another Dark Fountain which pupates into a Titan. The roaring has begun. With some difficulty and some help of Gerson, the Titan is taken care of before it can cause too much damage, allowing for the Dark Fountain to be sealed. Chris and Susie then return to the Light World, where it is revealed that Toriel cancelled choir practice and is safe at home, drunkenly dancing with Sad. End of chapter 4. Now on to chapter 5. Asgore's role in chapter 5. With Chapter 5, it will take place on the morning of a festival. I feel like the festival, and with it, Chapter 6 will occur that afternoon or that evening. We can be sure that Chapter 5 Dark World will be in Flower King, as both a prophecy and Garza mentioned flowers. For a theme, I feel like it will be a lush jungle, but instead of trees in the traditional sense, there'll be flowers the size of trees. The darkness there will be based on gardening equipment like watering cans, shears, and pots. I feel like the inferno of jealousy will be sparked by Asgore learning that Sans and Toriel are dating. As good of a guy as Asgore is, he is trapped in the past and he wants to get Toriel back. Trapped in the asylum doesn't mean Asgore gets institutionalized or something, as it can mean a place of retreat and security. Perhaps the asylum that traps Asgore will be this very dark world, one that he created in his own shop, where everything is the way it was, except viewed through the rose-tinted glass of nostalgia. Asgore has preserved his writing bouquet for what should be over 20 years upstairs, each flower in its own case. There are 7 of them, so each of them could be a flowery like Darkner, each one representing one of the dreamers and the holidays. Perhaps in the upstairs area of Flower King, with its Dark World counterpart Flower Kingdom, Asgore is on creative with names okay, will be a floating city within a glass bubble that you have to find a way to. Inside that city, everything will take a rose-tinted palette, making it feel very much like New Home and Undertale, represent how Asgore views the past with rose-tinted glasses. I feel like Asgore will be the main boss of Chapter 5, having created Darkhold to escape the present. For his boss battle, I feel like it will be an inversion of Undertale's Asgore fight, where he destroyed the mercy button at the beginning, believing that he didn't deserve any mercy. This time, I feel like the fight button will be destroyed either by Asgore, who doesn't want to fight, or by Chris, who doesn't want to fight their father. The win condition of the Asgore battle will be to make him realize that the past he yearns for is not only gone, but never existed in the first place. That is how I believe Asgore will play a role in Chapter 5. The Roaring Knights role in Chapter 5. I feel like Chapter 5 will be the chapter that we learn the Roaring Knight's identity. I believe it to be Death, as her being missing gives her the perfect alibi for her to be the knight who has horns similar to that of a holiday. Also, Black Knight, you can hear Lost Girl faded, which is Noel's leitmotif, and the title Lost Girl most likely refers to death. Another piece of evidence would be that the Black Shard is a weapon that can be equipped either by Chris or by Noel, 2 people who were close to death before she became the knight. Also, in the secret Asgore scene in Chapter 4, Asgore is in possession of a Black Shard, which means he has fought the Roaring Knight before. It seems that only people who were close to the knight before they became a knight can hold a Black Shard, as Susie's Newtown and Rosie most likely never met pre-knight death. Now that we know that the most likely candidate for the Roaring Knight's identity is December Holiday, I have an idea on how she became the Roaring Knight. Chris, Azriel, Noel, and Death like to go check out the shelter on the south end of town, which seemed to lead to a whole other world where they like to play games. That changed one night when disaster struck. Suddenly the ground within that dark world began to shake and crack, prompting the 4 young adventurers to make a mad dash to safety. However, Chris tripped and fell, and Death fell behind to catch Chris, but she only had enough time to throw them to safety. Death is missing, even feared to be dead. However, what happens next was worse than anybody could imagine. Death had fallen into what seemed like a bizarre version of a fun, familiar dark world, now sinister and cold. As she wandered through the dark, she found the darkness that used to join in on her and her friends' games, but they returned to stone. The darkness that were moving were nothing like the ones that Death had encountered. They wouldn't or couldn't play, they only knew how to attack, to destroy. Against all odds, Death survived. She fed on the Titan Spawn, vowing to make it back up and get back to her friends and family. However, her dubious diet changed her. Death, due to have an unusually high amount of determination, could hold on to her form, but only for so long. Out of a black material she found lying around, she crafted a suit that altered her proportions as long as it encased her head to toe. Death, her sanity tattered from being trapped in the obelisk for Angel knows how long, eventually flew up as if gravity no longer existed. She then pushed the shelter's doors open and stepped aside, but in the sun the armor began to melt. Death cried out in agony before fleeing back into the shelter, slammed the doors behind herself, and she waited. Death then found out that she could come out at night, but even then she had only so much time until the light began to burn her. Death wants to open more dark fountains not because she wants to cause a roaring, but because she just wants to live. Eventually, Carol and Chris learned who the Knight was, and they're working to undo her transformation. The whole police sacrifice is as Undyne, if you recall from Undertale, possesses a lot of determination. And just like Death, and Carol wants to figure out how Death became a Knight by recreating that transformation, so she could learn how to undo that transformation. As for the Knight's role, they enter the Flower Kingdom because they chose to investigate this new dark world that was created without their knowing influence. We know the Knight created the Dark Card Kingdom, Cyberworld, first and third Sanctuary Dark Worlds to spread the darkness. And while Chris created TV World, Dark World, and Carol's orders to lure Undyne in, and Susie created the second Sanctuary to find clues on how to enter the third Sanctuary. The Knight is scouted a Darkner who can make a good Shadow Crystal candidate, as well as seeking out the ruler of that Dark World in order to protect its Dark Fountain and encourage the creation of more. In Card Kingdom, the Knight gave a Shadow Crystal to Jevil, driving him mad, and to advertise create more Dark Fountains to Spade King if he were to overthrow the other three kings for his vengeance against the Lightners. As for the Knight using Jevil as a proxy, it is clear that it's due to Spade King hating and mistrusting Lightner, so Death avoiding him would keep him from finding out. In Cyberworld, the Knight tasked Queen with creating more dark fountains, using her desire to create a paradise for Lightners and gave Spamton the Shadow Crystal, with promises of making it big. In TV World, the Knight promises 10 of viewers if he wants to keep a fun game occupied, but as it wasn't the Dark World she had created, she didn't have the time to give the Shadow Crystal to one of its inhabitants. However, I feel like if she did, she would have chosen Arab, as he already fits the pattern, being the boss you have to go well your way to encounter, and giving you a rare powerful item if you beat him. Or she could have chosen Ram, as Ram being a stolen power trip is already something that doesn't belong in Chris's home, and he is heavily related to Uva West to attain the Shadow Metals, the aforementioned out-of-the-way item. In the Sanctuary, the interference of a fun game prevents the Knight from finding a ruler of that Dark World, or from appointing Darkner as that world's ruler, hence the stunt of a Titan. However, the Knight did give a Shadow Crystal to Gerson, but he got bad mojo from it, so he put it in his desk and thus was driven insane, like how Jevil and Spamton were. In Flower Kingdom, we know that the pattern is that Knight likes to give a Shadow Crystal before the fighter makes the ruler, with TV World being a notable exception, as it had a ruler antenna, but seeing that the Knight drops a Shadow Crystal there, it's likely she had no time to give it to someone. However, the whole ruler part is covered because Asgore is the Flower King, thus find a Shadow Crystal bearer. The pattern of the Shadow Crystal bosses is that they are usually things that don't belong. Card Kingdom's Shadow Crystal boss is Jevil, who is based off a Joker card, which is usually discarded. Cyberworld's Shadow Crystal boss is Spamton, who is a spam bot, which sends spam mails and you don't want that on your device. By attacking Ted as the Roaring Knight becomes a TV hijacker. Hijackers take over regularly broadcasted shows, and by being a Darkner based on memories of a deceased Lightner, as well as his hammer being covered in his dust, effectively making him a zombie, that means that Gerson is something that wouldn't belong in a holy place like a church. Thus, the Flower King Shadow Crystal boss must be something that doesn't belong in a garden. I'm thinking it's some kind of pest. This bot will give a good explanation for why you can only encounter the Shadow Crystal boss once you've gotten to a certain point within Chapter 5, because a Knight hasn't picked one out yet. Throughout Chapter 5, you get hints to the Knight's true identity as well as their motives. Then the answers are given to you. Once you beat Asgore, there's a brief scene where Asgore finally accepts the past to be his past and is ready to lead the fun gang to the room of the Dark Fountain But suddenly, an attack. Asgore takes the attack and is badly hurt. If you spare every monster you can, the Darkness of Flower Kingdom come together in some vines to pull him to safety. Result is injuries being less severe, and something that he can recover from by the time Chapter 7 rolls around. Chris will get angry at the Roaring Knight and demand to know why they attacked, as they had a deal. Susie will angrily ask Chris what they meant, and Asgore will weakly pipe up that he thinks he knows why. Asgore will explain that everything began to fall apart when Death disappeared, and that Chris blamed himself for what happened to her. The Fun Gang, which will consist of Chris, Susie, Rousey, Noelle, and Burnley at this point, will have a variety of reactions. Susie will take the betrayal hard, and there will be a boss battle against her that cannot be won, and she leaves Chris with 1 HP, angry but understands why Chris would do so. Susie then heals Chris, and then the Fun Gang proceeds to face the Roaring Knight, after Chris is made to promise to cooperate, and if you do enough damage to the Knight, it summons the Shadowy Shield, requiring the use of an Unleash Act to remove that seal. The battle ends, and we see the Roaring Knight covering her now exposed face due to her helm being destroyed as the light from Unleash fades. Susie and Rousey won't recognize that face, but they will realize it is the lightning. Noelle will ask Chris, is it really? She's kinda shocked, kinda relieved to see her sister again. Chris nods. We then get a flashback explaining how Death became the Knight. After that, Death manages to recreate her helmet and flies away. This will be the end of the Roaring Knight's role in Chapter 5. Synopsis. Now that we've figured out the Roaring Knight and Asgore's roles in Chapter 5, we can create a plot synopsis of a normal route. The chapter starts on the morning before the festival, and Toriel mentions that Asriel has called and that he's coming home for the festival and he'll be here just in time. Chris then goes to where the festival is being set up. The festival will be the set for Chapter 6 and sees Carol helping set it up. After moving their soul, Chris approaches a male who tells Chris that Rudy cannot come, as going to church in the condition he was in has put a toll on his already failing health, and he doesn't have long. Carol also says that she wishes that Death could come, and Chris agrees. Carol then takes Chris aside and reminds him of her deal, and that she is going to turn a night, and that could give him answers on how Death became a knight. However, we only hear up to the part where Carol wishes that Death could come. And then we hear this part. Carol asks Chris how their parents are doing. Chris tells Carol that they saw Sans and Toriel dancing drunkenly at their home last night, and Carol tells Chris she needs Asgore's help. Then Chris puts their soul back in, and you have to go around hometown to ask either Susie, Noelle, or Burnley to go to the festival with you, depending on who you said would come in Chapter 3. The two characters you don't pick will come together, and they will decide that the four of you will go to the festival. Then Chris will mention wanting to take Asgore. The four kids then head over to Flower King and try to get Asgore to come along. However, Chris lets it slip that Toriel and Sans are dating. And Asgore turns around, hangs his head, and slams the black shard into the floor of Flower King. A dark world has been created inside the flower shop, Flower Kingdom. Chris, Susie, Burnley, Noelle find themselves within a large field of yellow-pink flowers on the outskirts of a vast jungle of massive flowers in the place of trees. And upon looking up, they see the dark fountain going through a city in the sky protected by a rose-colored glass bubble. The four kids trek a little bit further, head towards a nearby cliff in order to get a better view, and they see that beneath that flowing city is a vast ravine. Rousey then meets up with them, wondering who made this dark world, and find out that it was Asgore who did so. With Chapter 5, there will be different points where you can choose your party members. You won't be able to swap Chris out, but you can choose between Susie, Rousey, Noelle, and Burnley. For Burnley, I'm thinking that he'll be more of a defensive mage, with wind magic as his mobile target, a decent attack but poor HP defense. Halberds will be his weapon. The party members will not only help in combat with their own spells and acts, but will cause different social interactions with NPCs and have different overall abilities. For Rousey, his superior healing will help with healing entrant NPCs in the overworld, which will do things like be immediately spared, give you items, etc. or open a path. Susie will be able to pick up heavy objects, carry them and throw them, which can be done to bridge gaps. Noelle's ice magic lets her freeze waterways, create bridges, and put out fires. And Birdley's wind magic will blow away piles of petals, power wind turbines, and put out fires. I feel like the puzzles that where you absolutely need Birdley will come in later, as if you do Neutral Road in Chapter 2, Birdley will still be injured. It will take some healing magic before you did any shape to solve puzzles and go into combat encounters. And if you finish Snowgrave in Chapter 2, whether or not you aborted in Chapter 4, Birdley will be absent in some of the puzzles that require him. After a bit of exploring and possibly fight the Shadow Crystal boss, you'll be able to enter the Floating City. Once you enter, you meet a family of flowers. These are a darker version of a bouquet of flowers. Asgore's attempt to reclaim the past he yearns for. Oh, and rules card shenanigans happen. Once you reach a throne room, there's the Asgore fight, the night fight, the big reveals, and then you seal the Dark Fountain. If you get the pacifist ending, Asgore goes to the festival. While the neutral ending, he is too injured to go. At the end, you go to the festival, Asgore shows up, there's a brief scene of him reuniting with his family, meeting Susie, and then the Dark Fountain is created. Cue credits. Now for the Chapter 5 Railroad. On the Spamton Sweepstakes website, we see the numbers 2 to 5 at different sizes. These sizes correlate to how much a weird route affects the different chapters, as you can't even start in Chapter 1, so there's no 1. The number 2 is the largest, as Chapter 2 is where you can start the weird route, and it causes severe divergence in the story of that chapter, up to it replaces a Queen final battle with a final battle against Spam in Neo. 3 is invisible, but just as big as 2. This is because Chapter 3 is completely unaltered by the weird route, save for some optional dialogue, but the sword route taken to attain the shadow battle has a lot of elements similar to a weird route. 4 is visible but small. This is because the only seed in Chapter 4 significantly altered by the weird route is a seed in the Holiday Manor, where you can re-equip Noelle with a sword wing to proceed with a weird route. And the number 5 is somewhere between the size of 2 and 4. I feel like the weird route will alter Chapter 5, but not as severely as Chapter 2 was affected. Here's how the Chapter 5 weird route will go. You will have the option to take Noelle by yourself to Flower King, and if you do so, you will proceed with weird route. I also feel like Chapter 5 will be where the weird route's true point of no return, its moral event horizon will be. But we'll put a pin on that until later. Chris and Noelle will be left with the option to wait for the others to catch up, or go further into the jungle on their own. If you choose not to wait for Susie and Rousey, the weird route continues. But if you choose to wait, then a route akin to a post-neutral Chapter 2 route will as highlighted before playable, but the mandatory Burley puzzle will be skipped all the way through. To continue the weird route, you need to kill each enemy in your path with Ice Shock, taking out mini-boss with Snowgrave. The Asgore boss battle will be the definitive point of no return for the Snowgrave route, and there the battle starts with Chris breaking the fight button, because they don't want to fight their father. Here you'll have to convince Noelle that Asgore ran over death with his truck. Once you convince Noelle, she unleashes the mother of all Snowgraves, freezing Asgore in a massive block of ice and leaving his throne room covered in snow and ice. All the doors will be frozen shut, preventing Susie and Rousey from entering. There will be a fight with a roaring knight who will get away, albeit barely. And learning that the knight is death instead of filling Noelle with hope will be the final nail in the coffin to break her mind. The fountain will be sealed, and once that happens, Asgore will fall to the ground in the light world before crumbling into a pile of dust. Chris and Noelle will exit in shock, and Susie will be waiting for them, and Noelle will simply tell Susie that Asgore won't make it to the festival. Then Asgore's arrival, end of Chapter 5. Ending. This is how I believe that Deltarune Chapter 5 will go. What do you think? Do you agree, and which of my predictions do you agree and disagree with? Please like, subscribe, and share for more content, and leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Tyson out.